Hello, folks. This is Taylor Elwood here, and tonight we're going to talk about magical healing done via energy work and what some of the do's and do nots are. I decided to continue this one because of what I talked about last week in regards to storing energy and restoring it, and restoring one's energy. And I figured, since I'm already talking about doing some type of stuff with energy work, we may as well take this a little bit further. Now, in last week's video, I did share, kind of a do not with energy work, which is like you don't want to overextend yourself. You don't want to do something where you're giving away too much of yourself in order to heal someone else. So that's our first do not, and I shared that in the previous video, so you can watch that if you want to after you watch this one. But another do not would be that you really don't want to, if you're doing energy work for the purposes of healing somebody, you don't want to you don't want to do it in such a way where you're essentially exchanging their energy for yours. You're exchanging their condition for yours. This is something that ends up happening, sometimes, especially with people who are starting out healing, where, they'll work on somebody, and essentially what they'll do is they'll swap out that person's energy or that person's, health issue or whatever for their own health. And then they end up taking that on. And that is definitely a no no, because aside from the fact that you're essentially dealing then with their illness or whatever else, you're also setting yourself up for a situation where you could have long lasting negative effects in terms of healing, of the healing that you're doing, because you're helping them out, but you're basically swapping out your health for their health. So you're not really helping anyone. If anything, you're damaging yourself, and you might be helping them, but it's not necessarily helping them in the way that's actually best for them, because there may be existing conditions, energetically, that still need to be dealt with that haven't been. You've temporarily alleviated the condition, but you haven't dealt with it. And so this is something that's really important to remember. The other no-no is that and this again relates back to the energy work itself, is that you don't want to use too much of your own energy in healing. A lot of times what I'll see with other people who are doing healing work is they'll overextend themselves by using too much of their own energy, because they don't have a good sense of boundaries or awareness. And what they also don't realize is at the same time, when they're working on somebody else, they're dealing with a conversion process, if you will, with the energy work. And what I mean by that is you have this energy that you're working with and through, and what ends up happening is you're putting it into them to heal them. But what you're not realizing is that there's a digestion process, if you will, that there's a process where they have to basically convert that energy over to their own energy. And if you put too much into them, you can actually end up overloading them. And at the same time, you're also, again, overextending yourself. So, really, when it comes right down to healing, we want to take a look at healing from some different perspectives. The healing that we want to, the way we want to approach healing is we want to do healing from a place where it has minimal impact on us and maximum impact on the person. And the way that I like to approach this is that when I'm doing healing work on somebody, I only put a small amount of my own energy into them. And what I'm mainly doing is I'm using that energy to take over and direct their energy in terms of healing them. So, as an example, let's say I'm working on somebody who's got some issues with their legs, and I'm doing kind of a healing work on them in that way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of energy into them, just enough to connect with their energy, and then what I'm going to start doing is basically working with their energy to dissolve the energetic blockages in their legs, in order to start releasing the stuff that doesn't belong, and at the same time recycling and converting the stuff that does belong and making it stronger. And by doing that process, what I'm doing is I'm ensuring that, it's really their energy which is healing them, as opposed to my energy. I'm just putting in enough of mine to help direct what it is that I'm doing, but I'm essentially allowing it to go in there and take care of it. And at the same time, what I'm doing with that energy is I'm essentially listening to their body, because their body is going to ultimately direct me toward what it needs. And this is very useful as well, because you don't want to assume that you know what they need. You want to connect with their body and be able to truly listen to it, as opposed to trying to do something with it that may or may not be effective for them. The other thing that I will do is I will sometimes draw upon some elemental energy or some planetary energy or things along those lines that are appropriate. Again, this is going to kind of depend on the person. I mean, when you're working on somebody, you want to diagnose the issue carefully and figure out, what is it they need. And part of this is going to involve talking with them and finding out, what's the nature of their condition. What are they doing otherwise? I mean, they ideally aren't just relying upon energetic work to heal them, but they're actually doing whatever else they need to be doing. And also, you want to get a sense as to what they're willing to do, in order to take care of themselves. If I'm healing somebody, I want to know that they're going to basically be taking the right corrective course in terms of taking care of themselves. And some of that really boils down to the fact that, remember, if you're doing healing work, you're not a doctor. I mean, like, I'm not a doctor, okay? I haven't been trained as a doctor. So you want to be very careful and not just be giving out medical advice, but what you really want to be doing is making sure they are consulting with the appropriate professionals, and that, at the same time, that they're keeping very careful track of what they're doing and how they're taking care of themselves. If I'm doing healing work on somebody, one of the things that I like to do is I like to check in and say, how does this feel? What are you noticing? And listen very carefully to their answers, because that's going to be indicative of what is working or not working. Even though I'm attuned into what they're doing via the energy work that I'm doing, I want to pay very close attention to that kind of thing. When you're doing healing work, on somebody else, and you use the elemental and planetary energies, the same thing applies as to what I described before, in that you want to use it in a very measured and careful manner. You don't want to overwhelm their system, because here's the thing: if somebody is sick physically, energetically, they're not going to be in a much better place, if maybe even in a worse place, because of whatever it is they're dealing with. So you have to be very careful. And I would really say, I mean, ideally, what you're doing is you're not just doing healing work on them. You're helping them out by, you might suggest a couple of things. You might say, like, do some type of meditation work where you're doing, like I would always recommend doing, like, water breathing, where you're doing, like, the dissolving work inwardly yourself, or check out some other types of qigong work that can be done in tandem with whatever else you're doing medicinally. Things along those lines are very important to keep in mind as well. You always want to keep in mind that, like, whatever you're doing for somebody energy wise, that you're doing it, that you are recognizing, like, what you're taking on, and that you're very careful about it. That you're not just doing stuff without it without like fully considering what the ramifications could be. I find that a lot of times, people will do healing work, and they won't think about, like, what the ramifications are to themselves, and they won't think about what the ramifications are to the other person. And that lack of considered awareness can end up really biting you in the butt, so to speak, because if you're overextending yourself or you're taking something on that you're not really ready for or whatever else, that can be problematic. But also because you're working with this person and whatever they're dealing with, you have to be aware of that and recognize it. I mean, that's why they always say ask before you heal somebody. Like, if can I heal you? And that's great, but that's really a very preliminary thing. I mean, I would say that if I'm going to heal somebody, I'm not just going to ask them if I can heal them. I'm going to ask them a lot more questions. I'm going to really look at the situation, and I'm going to tell them what I can do and what I can't do, and what I'm going to and what I would recommend. And at the end of the day, I'm also going to say, like, look, this is not medical advice. This is just here's my frame of reference and how this might apply to what you're dealing with, and here's what I can do. And I think that that's really important to do, so that way you're not setting yourself up to fail. All right, that's tonight's video. Just wanted to share that with you. Thank you for watching, and take care.